My name is Sierra, and for a long time, I believed love meant trust without limits. I believed family protected you. I believed marriage meant partnership. I was wrong. The day everything changed didn't begin with screaming or drama. It began with silence, the kind that settles into a room before a storm finally breaks. I came home after meeting with a financial advisor about missing funds connected to my inheritance. My parents had passed away years earlier, leaving me their jewelry business, a vineyard overseas, and investments worth nearly $15 million. It wasn't just wealth, it was their life's work. When I walked into the house, my husband Ronan and his family were waiting in the living room. His mother folded her hands neatly in her lap and spoke first. "We think it's best if you leave for a while." No warmth, no explanation, just distance. I laughed softly because it sounded unreal. "What are you talking about?" Ronan didn't look at me. That hurt more than the words. Over the previous 2 years, I had watched pieces of my life quietly disappear. Company accounts were transferred. Properties were restructured. Investments became inaccessible unless someone else approved them first. Every time I asked questions, I was told I was overwhelmed, emotional, grieving, and every time I doubted myself instead of them. That afternoon, standing in my own home, I finally understood what had really happened. They hadn't supported me after my parents died. They had positioned themselves around my grief like investors around an opportunity. I went upstairs calmly and packed a suitcase. Inside it, I placed the few things that still felt undeniably mine: my passport, my mother's sapphire ring, handwritten letters from my father, and a photograph of the three of us taken before the accident that changed everything. When I came back downstairs, my mother-in-law blocked the doorway. "You're not taking valuables from this house," she said. I looked at her quietly. "Those belonged to my parents." Ronan still said nothing. That was the moment something inside me stopped breaking and started rebuilding. I left the house carrying only one suitcase and the growing realization that I had spent years asking people to value me while they were busy calculating what they could take from me instead. When my parents died, I was 27 and completely unprepared for the emptiness that followed. Ronan had held me during the funeral and whispered, "You'll never be alone again." At the time, I believed him. His parents stepped in quickly after the inheritance transferred. They offered to help manage the businesses while I recovered emotionally. They reassured me that family handled things together. It sounded loving. Looking back, it was strategic. My father-in-law slowly took over operations at the jewelry stores. My mother-in-law handled trust paperwork and financial meetings. Ronan encouraged me to rest while they lightened the burden. And I let them, because grief makes you vulnerable in ways pride never admits. Over time, assets were consolidated under shared management structures. Business accounts were merged. Properties shifted ownership categories. I signed documents without fully understanding the long-term consequences because I trusted the people placing the papers in front of me. Meanwhile, their lifestyle changed dramatically. Designer vacations, luxury renovations. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, who had never kept a stable job, suddenly launched expensive business ventures funded by money no one could clearly explain. Whenever I questioned anything, they made me feel selfish. "Why are you acting paranoid?" "We're trying to help you. Your family." That word became their favorite disguise. Family. As if saying it often enough could turn manipulation into love. But deep down, something inside me knew the truth long before I was ready to face it. The final confirmation came late one night when I overheard Vanessa laughing in the kitchen. "She still thinks the money is hers," she said. Someone else laughed. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "She was always too trusting." I stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding, not from heartbreak, but from clarity. For the first time, I stopped asking whether I was imagining things. I knew. The next morning, I contacted a forensic accountant my father once trusted. His name was David Okoro. 3 days later, he called me close to midnight. "Sierra," he said carefully, "you need to prepare yourself." Nearly every major asset connected to my inheritance had been moved, leveraged, or transferred through shell companies tied to Ronan's family. And worse, some documents carried my forged signature. I sat in silence after the call ended. The room suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I was standing inside someone else's life. Then something unexpected happened. I became calm, not numb, focused. There's a difference. I stopped confronting them, stopped arguing, stopped defending myself. Instead, I started documenting everything: bank statements, emails, property transfers, hidden transactions. Every detail became a thread, and slowly I began weaving those threads into something stronger than grief: a strategy. I hired attorneys specializing in financial fraud and estate manipulation. Quietly, we built a case across multiple countries connected to the businesses and accounts. I transferred the few untouched assets into secure holdings they couldn't access. Then one morning, without telling anyone, I boarded a plane and disappeared from their world. Not out of fear, out of intention. For months, they thought I was broken. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. I rented a small apartment near the coast in southern Europe where nobody knew my name. I spent my mornings reviewing legal files and my evenings walking beside the ocean, remembering who I had been before grief and manipulation convinced me I existed only to provide for others. Healing wasn't dramatic, it was small. Sleeping peacefully for the first time in years, making coffee without anxiety, reading my mother's letters again without crying, remembering that I was a person before I became someone else's resource. While I rebuilt myself quietly, my legal team moved forward. Then one morning, everything shifted. Accounts connected to the fraudulent transfers were frozen. Properties came under investigation. Business records were subpoenaed. The carefully curated empire Ronan's family built using my parents' legacy began collapsing almost overnight. That was when Ronan finally called. His voice sounded panicked. "Sierra, what's happening?" I stood on my balcony overlooking the sea before answering. "The truth," I said. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say back. News outlets eventually picked up the story. Financial fraud investigations spread quickly once the evidence surfaced. But I refused interviews. I didn't want revenge to become my identity. Because the deeper truth was this: winning wasn't watching them lose. Winning was realizing I no longer needed their approval to feel valuable. That changed everything. Over the following year, the businesses connected to the fraud collapsed under legal scrutiny. Properties were repossessed, accounts remained frozen while investigations continued. And me, I finally started living. I bought a small cottage near the water with creaky floors and a garden that needed patience. It felt fitting. So did I. I began volunteering at a youth center for young women navigating financial abuse and family instability. Many of them carried the same exhaustion I once hid behind polite smiles. One girl asked me during a workshop, "How do you move on after people betray you like that?" I thought about the question for a long moment before answering. You stop building your worth around people committed to misunderstanding you. She wrote that down. I never forgot it. A few months later, I launched a nonprofit called The Inheritance Project, an organization helping women protect themselves from financial coercion, manipulation, and hidden abuse within families and relationships. We connected women with attorneys, financial educators, therapists, and emergency support systems. What began as survival slowly became purpose, and purpose heals wounds revenge never can. Ronan continued reaching out occasionally, sometimes apologizing, sometimes angry, sometimes pretending nothing had happened at all. I never answered, not because I hated him, but because silence no longer felt empty to me. It felt peaceful. 2 years later, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership summit in Lisbon. I almost declined. But standing backstage that evening, I realized something important. For years, I had hidden my voice to protect people who never protected me. I wasn't doing that anymore. When I walked onto the stage, the room fell quiet. I told them everything, not the headlines, not the legal details, but the emotional truth behind it all. How betrayal makes you question your instincts. How manipulation often arrives dressed as concern. How grief can make you hand your power to people who promise safety. And finally, how healing begins the moment you stop begging to be chosen by people committed to using you. Near the end of my speech, I held up my mother's sapphire ring hanging from a chain around my neck. "They tried to take everything," I said softly. "But they never understood the one thing my parents truly gave me wasn't money." The audience waited quietly. It was resilience. Some people cried. Others simply nodded like they understood something deeply personal without needing more words. After the event, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Your story made me feel less alone," she whispered. And honestly, that mattered more than every courtroom victory combined. Today, my life is smaller than the one I used to have, but it's real. I wake up in a home filled with peace instead of performance. I work with people who value honesty more than appearances. I surround myself with love that doesn't require sacrifice to prove loyalty, and every spring I plant something new in my garden. A reminder that growth takes time. A reminder that surviving isn't the same as living. Most importantly, a reminder that no matter how deeply someone betrays you, your future still belongs to you. Because in the end, they didn't destroy me. They revealed me. And that became the greatest gift of all.